Newberry County, South Carolina, was founded in 1785 by German, Scottish, and Irish settlers. This area is nestled between the Broad and Saluda rivers and located in the lower tier of the Piedmont region, where generations of families have made their living from the land. This region is also home to Newberry College, founded in 1856, just 4 years before the American Civil War, and the Monadnock Little Mountain, which has persisted the process of erosion. Farmers in this region became known as Dutch Fork farmers, and the invention of the cotton gin helped Dutch Fork farmers to generate large profits for their major cash crop, cotton. Though the invention of the cotton gin brought about many benefits for the farmers in the area, it also ruined the soil, reduced the number of farms in the area, and increased the need for slave labor. The increased number of slaves being brought into this area created a 2-to-1 ratio between white and African American slaves. The slavery issue caused many Quakers in the area to migrate north because they condemned the practice of slavery, while others migrated to larger and southern cities to expand their fortunes. The increased number of slaves during this time incited fear in many white slave owners in the area, because they had heard of the slave revolts by Denmark Vesey in Charleston and the Nat Turner Revolt in Virginia. During this time, 2 African American male slaves were executed in Newberry County for making a statement about what they would do if the Nat Turner Revolt had ever reached their area. This is an example of the fear that a slave uprising could cause and how far slave owners would go to make sure their slaves remained subservient. However, in 1840, in this region, the Negro Law was passed. It stated that any good slave should be able to buy their freedom. This caused turmoil in their political climate because of the differences in thought during this time. Despite the Negro Law, by 1860, there were 937 slaveholders in Newberry County, with 11 of them owning 100 or more slaves. The county had grown tremendously because of slave labor and had seen much prosperity up into the Civil War and Radical Reconstruction, which some in the area called the Dark Days. This county refused to ratify the 14th Amendment, but was eventually forced to do so. During Radical Reconstruction, former slaves in this area were anxious to assert their new political freedoms and act independently from their former masters. Once white supremacy took roots in this county, white initiatives like the Red Shirts and the KKK, there was much corruption and violence surrounding the African American communities in the county. The Ku Klux Klan and Red Shirts used their power to instill fear and terrorize the African American communities in the county. One African American woman who lived in Newberry County vividly remembered the Ku Klux Klan members riding on horses with white sheets covering their faces and burning crosses. She remembered her entire family hiding under their beds in their home, praying the KKK would not stop at their home. During this time, the KKK had become extremely militant, no longer being able to depend on the intimidation as a scare tactic to uphold white supremacy. They started to become increasingly violent. Due to the KKK having many of its members living in Newberry County, the county became known as KKK County. Democrats in South Carolina wanted to regain control of governmental positions and eliminate the Negro Republican vote during Radical Reconstruction. The Democratic Party went hand in hand with the actions of the Ku Klux Klan, working together in most cases. The violence exploded after the elections of 1868, when 2,500 armed whites gathered in Lawrence County to violently protest the elections of 1870, where a Republican candidate was elected. The violence spread among the upstate. African Americans were pulled out of jails and beaten and murdered, and in the 6 months following, there were 304 incidences committed by white supremacist KKK members in Newberry County and the surrounding areas. These occurrences had gotten so bad that national attention had been brought to the situation, and it became known as the infamous Ku Klux Klan conspiracy, in which President Ulysses S. Grant passed the KKK Act, hoping to put an end to the rebellious South. In 1871, during the trials of known KKK members from Newberry County and the surrounding areas, among them 871 individuals connected to this conspiracy were indicted, with only 27 individuals being ruled as guilty, with 71 individuals who pled guilty, and by 1875 they were all pardoned and the charges were dismissed. Though these were token arrests, they show an attempt in trying to put an end to the KKK's reign of torture. The Ku Klux Klan had succeeded in their efforts to cause violence and incite fear in African Americans. This shows an attempt to hold these individuals accountable for their actions, but it doesn't go far enough because there were no tangible changes made. These trials temporarily shattered the Ku Klux Klan and reinstated law and order to an extent, but there would be a resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan in the years to come. Newberry County, like many other areas in the South, has a rich but also dark past with dark undertones of slavery, racism, white supremacy, and oppression. Like many other settlements of the time, trade was pushed by major cash crops and the need for free labor. By the continuation of slavery in this county, landowners would become prosperous, but the Civil War halted their prosperity, with men going off to fight in the war and the county being destroyed with major battles. After radical Reconstruction came and went, leaders of this area enacted white supremacy to further oppress the African American population. In this area, whether it was scare taxes to maintain dominance or lynchings of African Americans and the large number of Ku Klux Klan members who resided in the county. Overall, Newberry County is much like any other county in the South. White Democrats and white supremacists were in power. They controlled policies and virtually controlled every aspect of Southern life.